It is too short a season on the Star Trek Critic. But first, before we get to this episode, we're going back to the end of Angel 1 where I missed reporting this one last error. The turbolift doors were stuck open. Now back to too short a season, where an admiral has to pay for the crime of playing with the Prime Directive. Look closely, the planet is slowly orbiting in the same direction that the Enterprise is traveling. The first point is lost for having an 85-year-old admiral with a debilitating disease. Most likely in the utopian future of Star Trek, retirement age would be lower than what it is now, and he would have retired, been an ambassador for a few years, and then retired again probably. After 40 years of civil war, the leader of the planet would not be wearing a military uniform, so -1 point. The only exception is if he's a dictator. Picard thinks he can handle the situation again, but they want Admiral Jameson. The Enterprise is going to take Admiral Jameson to negotiate for the hostages. Look closely, Captain Picard flexes his jaw before he goes into the turbolift. -1 point for beaming a wheelchair-bound admiral onto this transporter pad. It does not have a wheelchair ramp. Captain Picard says he is not simply an advisor, he is going to control the away team and all his actions. The admiral says, "No, that's my line. The narrator is just goofing around again. Keep an eye on those reflections on the back panels." Empty space says this is the voice of Karnas. Oh, there he is. For wanting to promote peace on his planet, he's got a lot of guns on display on that wall behind him. While they talk, Picard lets out a really good fart. Deanna Troi is on to Admiral Jameson. She's talking about Karnas and Jameson there. She should know that this is a grudge match between the two old guys, and she should have told Captain Picard, but she didn't, so -1 point. Karnas gave zero information on who the terrorist group was. They could have done research that would help them, but he didn't, and that's a red flag, and they didn't try to find out more information, so -1 point. Karnas wants revenge alright, but it's against the Admiral, not the terrorists. Deanna Troi says she wants to negotiate. Look closely, there is a 3D chess set in the background. Even 20 to 30 years ago, they would have been in their 50s and still retired. Luckily, the Enterprise is saucer-shaped, so all the set crew has to do is move stuff around in one room to make it look like different quarters. There goes Admiral Jameson. This might end up being a really short show after all. Annie is on to him. She knows something's up. What are those? They look like keyboards. In the background is Livingston the fish. Beverly says the Admiral lied and something is wrong with his mind. Picard says she sounds like Troi. What an insult. Just look at how happy she is now being compared to a telepath. She's quietly contemplating saying some things to the producers that might get her fired. The Admiral is wondering, when did Klingons start serving aboard Federation ships? The Captain does not perform the Picard maneuver. Of course, you never get to see the Edeni star cluster outside the window. The reason there are so many crewmen in the background is to cover all those reflections. Dr. Crusher gets to tell Picard, "I told you there was something fishy about his medical records." 400 years in the future, they are going back to tapes. And he quotes Commander Riker.
Cody, what the hell is going on here?
Not only can he stand up now, something else is rising. Uh-oh, it looks like the overdose on Viagra got him to finish before he even got to start. Aww. Dr. Crusher's thinking, if I find out what's going on, I can write a book and make millions. Unlike the rest of the crew, she does not say, "Aye, sir," she says, "Yes, sir." And can't figure out how to turn on the TV. The 3D chessboard has been moved, so -1 point. Jameson did a dirty deal and got a poisonous fountain of youth drug, and knowing it was deadly, took both their 2-year doses overnight. So -1 point for it not already killing him. Picard says it's all just a myth.
But she's my myth. No, myth.
Yeah.
Jameson was half a man, and then he started to change. If this was made today, he would turn into a woman at the end of the show. And Anne would be thinking, hey, that's not such a bad idea after all, is it? It's always sad when a couple this old has a fight. Data says aye. Wesley also says yes, sir, like his mother, but he's not on the show today, so -1 point. Jameson identifies as the negotiator. Data says aye #2. The first baseman is behind this thing. It turns out I was right in my theory. It's two old men holding a grudge. Geordi says aye #3. There are now 6 crewmen in the back trying to cover up that reflection. And now there are 8. but they still didn't block the reflection of the microphone, so -1 more point. Jameson pretends he knew this all along. This is Picard's way of saying, you knew this all along, didn't you? Jameson is in charge of the mission, not the ship, so -1 point for him being in the captain's chair. Data says, I number 4. This is a red flag that the Admiral believes nothing has changed after 45 years. Thankfully, all the tunnels are underground, because tunnels above the ground are called bridges. Picard politely says, maybe we should talk to him first before sending my people into a trap and getting them all killed. Jameson says, the crew is expendable. The whole purpose of this is to make me look good. Now for some girl talk. Take a look at this beautiful painting in the background. It has the Enterprise on it. I would love to have that painting on my wall. Now for the reveal, and Picard's thinking, so that's what you look like without all your makeup. Picard is going to learn that Jameson dealt dirty and the planet of Mordan lost. This was brought up in a similar episode.
You're condemning this whole planet to a war that may never end. It could go on for year after year.
But this time, instead of two sides arming the people, Jameson played both sides. It's a miracle nobody called him out. His interpretation of the Prime Directive is to break it. Picard points out that Karnas is guilty too. Jameson's like, cool, I can walk up the steps this time. -1 plot point because there are only 5 of them there right now. -1 point for Picard going with him for really no reason. -1 point for Data and Geordi going and not 2 actual security guards. -1 point for Riker not freaking out like he normally does. That's unusual. -1 point for none of them wearing anything tactical. -1 point for them landing a little bit farther out. -1 point for Jameson aiming at Picard. -1 point for the Enterprise not scanning the planet for the hostages. On Angel 1, they found Ramsey really quick just by looking for platinum. Despite Data's information, they all decide, let's just follow Jameson into the trap. And -1 point for not bringing down a second SWAT team that's trained for rescues. Worf barely speaks his show, -1 point. -1 point for an obvious line where they're going to cut through. It would be too hot and dangerous to walk through this, so -1 point. They should have just beamed through. Oh look, Tasha took my advice. Geordi says it's time to quote Admiral Akbar.
It's a trap!
Data's stunt double has a really bad wig, so -1 point. This is the only time they mention that phaser settings have different sounds. -1 point for not having stun grenades. And what's this guy doing? And never stand like this when you're being shot at. It's a really bad idea. And the failed raid just played into Karnas' hands. -1 point for too much Troy cleavage. As you can see, Gates McFadden is thinking that she might have to show cleavage too, or she will get fired. The raid failed. No shit. Riker says, I number 5, that means we get to drink. -1 point for Karnas stealing Q's Eagles. It turns out this is everybody's favorite Who song. He says, I thought you wanted me. Maybe something else was going on that we didn't know about. The guy on the left is looking at the camera, so -1 point. Picard calls out Karnas on his own BS. He has sworn to his people Jameson will pay for his crimes. If the planet knows what Jameson did, they probably want nothing to do with the Federation. Jameson is bouncing around like he's got really bad diarrhea and isn't going to make it to the end of the scene. -1 point for all his weapons coming from previous Star Trek shows. The 2 lifelong lovers say goodbye. And he's gone. Then Karnas frees the hostages before Picard gives him a really good ass whooping. The reason Anne wanted her husband left on Mordan is so Dr. Crusher won't chop it up to write a book about, like she did with the Ferengi 6 years from now. They say the quest for youth is so futile. I guess they won't be making a movie about it at all then, will they? The last point is lost for all the black paper on the panels in the back to cover up reflections. They don't know yet that the future of Star Trek is lens flares. Some horribly cheesy final lines to say, and then Geordi says, I number 6. So, who were the Mordans? Clayton Rohner has 85 screen credits, including T.J. Hooker, Good vs. Evil, and The Human Centipede 3. Michael Pataki is also in the club of being in the original series. He has 175 more screen credits, including The Twilight Zone, Charlie's Angels, and Automan. And Marcia Hunt just recently left us. However, she must have taken some of that de-aging drug since she made it to just a few weeks short of her 105th birthday. Yes! She was a supporter of UNICEF and the Red Cross. Sadly, her only child died right after birth. She has 115 screen credits starting in the 1930s, including Twilight Zone, Murder, She Wrote, and The Outer Limits. and she almost got the part of Melanie in Gone with the Wind. Too Short a Season, where you pay the price for the Fountain of Youth and see what happens when you break the Prime Directive and arm both sides of a civil war, gets a score of 70. Thanks for viewing. Be sure to leave comments below, click that like button, the share button, the subscribe button, and return again for more of the Star Trek Critic.